Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. Here's what the record supports. Denver, Sunday, March 1st, 2015. A mother of two, Stacy Feldman, 44, has a familiar weekend plan. The kids attend religious class in the morning, then a school carnival. Noon is the handshake time. She's expected to pick them up. 12:00 comes and goes. No arrival. No text confirming a delay. Schedules start to shift around that silence, the kind you feel first and explain later. By evening, the household narrative is simple. She was found unresponsive in the upstairs bathroom shower at home, and a call to 911 was placed. The initial posture from responders and medical authorities is cautious, manner of death, undetermined. That label is not a verdict. It's a placeholder that means the evidence, as first seen, does not conclusively sort itself into accident, natural, suicide, or homicide. In cases like this, the bathroom is the only scene under analysis. There is no second location in this story. Our focus stays inside that room and on the clock that frames it. From the outside, this day blends into thousands of Sundays on the Front Range. In cities like Denver, murders aren't just crimes. They tear at the fabric of a quiet community. But this is not a murder announcement. It's a timeline. When we test a story, we don't chase rumors. We check who was where, when, and what did or did not happen at specific times. We document the pickup that didn't occur. We note when the call came in. We freeze frame routine against deviation. That's how an undetermined start is supposed to work. You'll hear a claim that this was an accident in a shower. The question for investigators is never, could something have happened? It's, does the totality of facts require it? In bathroom deaths, pattern matters. What injuries present, what don't. What sequence the body suggests, whether the lived-in details of a house line up with a sudden, plausible slip. The data align too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. When a timeline and a narrative disagree, procedure says, side with the clock until the body tells you otherwise. For now, we hold to 3 verified anchors: expected noon pickup, later discovery in the bathroom at home, 911. The rest is kept tight because it has to be. Stacy's day did not include goodbyes, and it did not include an on-time reunion with her kids. That absence is the first hard edge in the file. If you're new to this channel, understand the approach. One house, one timeline, one claim tested against medicine and digital traces, no second ending, no second scene, and no rush to a suspect. This is not a place for speculation. It is a place for what can be demonstrated. In the next chapter, we'll examine why medical examiners sometimes leave early bathroom deaths as undetermined and what that means for evidence preservation, interviews, and the sequence of tests that follow. For now, the only appropriate conclusion is restraint. Medical examiners use undetermined for a reason. It is not a shrug. It is a controlled pause until evidence supports one of 4 manners of death: natural, accident, suicide, or homicide. In bathroom fatalities, the pause is common. Wet surfaces create plausible slips. Water alters lividity distribution and can blur bruising patterns. Resuscitation efforts can leave artifacts that mimic injury. A careful examiner documents first, withholds judgment, and lets the body speak through findings that survive the noise. Denver, March 1st, 2015 remains our fixed point. The only scene in this case is the upstairs bathroom/shower at the Feldman residence. Standard protocol begins at the threshold. Scene photographs before movement, a record of water status, room temperature, ventilation, and any items within reach of the fixture. Responders secure the area. Investigators catalog what is present and what is conspicuously absent. No second address, no new discovery site. When a case later goes to trial, scene discipline, what was touched, what wasn't, matters as much as any lab result. From there, the file builds in layers. The external exam notes general condition, any patterned abrasions, fresh contusions, or defensive injury indications. The internal exam addresses soft tissue hemorrhage, airway structures, and micro findings that separate impact from compression. Petechiae, if present, must be interpreted with care. They are not automatic proof of any one mechanism. Toxicology is ordered because intoxication can explain a fall, mask pain responses, or complicate timelines. Even negative toxicology has probative weight. It closes doors investigators might otherwise chase. Bathroom deaths complicate sequence. If water ran over the body, lividity may fix in unusual distributions. If the body was partially supported by a surface, pressure marks can resemble restraint, when the explanation may be mechanical posturing after collapse. Conversely, some restraint or airflow obstruction leaves subtle cues that a casual eye will miss. This is why undetermined appears early. The responsible move is holding the line until histology, tox screens, and a second-pass synthesis settle conflict between scene story and physiology. Digital evidence runs parallel. Devices record call times, message gaps, and app usage that locate people in the same way a witness would. That material is not speculation, it is time-stamped. In this case, the only reason to collect it is to verify or contradict the narrow window on a single day. We are not chasing personalities. We are testing a timeline. When a household says an accident occurred in a shower, the question isn't whether showers are dangerous. They are. The question is whether the totality of physical and digital data behaves like a spontaneous fall inside that specific window. Undetermined also protects the integrity of interviews. If an examiner calls a manner too early, it can contaminate statements. People change language when they believe an answer is expected. The measured posture allows detectives to ask the same neutral questions they ask in every sudden death. Where were you between fixed time A and fixed time B? Who was present? What changed? Did anyone move the decedent before first responders arrived? Simple, consistent, documentable. Those answers are tested against the clock, not against hunches. There is a community dimension, and it's practical. In cities like Denver, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. But announcing homicide without the science undermines trust, just as much as ignoring red flags. Families deserve clarity that survives court rules. Undetermined preserves that possibility. It keeps the file clean until facts earn their labels. For viewers who follow true crime closely, here is the value of this step. Many stage scenes rely on the myths of bathrooms, the assumption that water explains everything. It doesn't. Patterns explain. Sequences explain. A credible investigation treats a bathroom like any other potential scene. Diagrammed, measured, refrigerated samples retained, chain of custody intact. If the story is accurate, the evidence will carry it. If not, the same rigor will expose the gap. The data align too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. Our job is to verify which alignment is real and which alignment is storytelling. This is where we leave the concept and return to the file. The manner remained undetermined at the start. The scene remained singular. The timeline remained narrow. What changes next is not emotion, it's expertise. When a specialist revisits the injuries and the mechanics of a fall versus airway compromise, ambiguity gives way to a testable hypothesis. In the following installment, we will step through that reevaluation and see how medicine challenged the early label without expanding the scene or altering the day. Timelines decide cases like this. We start with what can be pinned to a clock and we discard what can't. March 1st, 2015, Denver. One residence, one bathroom. One mother, Stacy Feldman, 44, with a standing obligation at noon. Nothing here depends on memory alone. The record gives us contact attempts, school scheduling, call logs, and response times. The aim is not to accuse, it's to lock the window in which something irreversible happened. Morning hours looked normal on paper. The children had religious class, rides were arranged in advance. Messages exchanged early that day supported a simple plan. Stacy would handle pickup around 12 o'clock p.m. That is the first immovable point. Schools keep attendance and dismissal logs. If a parent who reliably appears does not, staff remember it. That non-appearance is not drama, it is a documented deviation. Investigators capture that gap and preserve it as a fixed reference against which later statements are tested. From the noon mark forward, the household plan changed. The reason given publicly was straightforward. Stacy didn't show, so logistics shifted. This is where digital evidence earns its name. Phones either move data or they don't. If a device stops creating routine signals, calls, texts, app pings, during a period when it would normally be active, that silence is mapped. It doesn't prove cause, it narrows opportunity. In this case, the phone record and the missed pickup point to a window between late morning and late afternoon when Stacy could no longer fulfill a predictable task. Investigators next align movement. Who retrieved the children? Who was physically home and when? The answers are verified with time-stamped artifacts, not impressions, school pickup times, gas station receipts if any, doorbell pings, if any, and the simplest of all, 911 logs. That last item provides the second immovable point, the exact time the call for help was placed. Emergency communication centers timestamp intake and dispatch, and EMS units record arrival and contact. The set of 4 marks, noon miss, altered logistics, 911 placement, EMS contact, creates a ladder you can't climb around. Every assertion has to fit between those rungs. The bathroom remains the only scene. That matters when interpreting the clock because there is no second location to explain delays or detours. If an accident occurred, it occurred there. If assistance was attempted, it happened there. Digital checks focus on corroboration, not surprise. Were there calls for advice before 911? Were there searches relevant to medical distress? Did any device on the premises record unusual activity in the hours bracketing the missed pickup? This isn't speculation about character. It's a simple test of whether actions aligned with the story of a sudden shower emergency inside a narrow window. Neighbors and routine contacts are evaluated the same way. Did anyone expect to see Stacy that afternoon? Was there a confirmed appointment she missed besides the noon pickup? If yes, does the timeline show outreach from others? Calls or texts that went to voicemail without response? That pattern, when present, demonstrates the moment a person effectively leaves the stream of the day. In an undetermined death, that disappearance from the ordinary is one of the cleanest signals you get. It's not dramatic, it's clinical. The process avoids loaded questions. Detectives use neutral prompts. When did you first realize she hadn't arrived? What did you do? When did you return home? When did you enter the bathroom? When did you make the call? Statements are then overlaid on the communications record. If a version of events claims action at a time the device record contradicts, the contradiction is documented, not argued. If, instead, the personal account and the digital marks line up, that alignment is noted and preserved. Either outcome has value later in court because juries respect clocks. They also respect consistency. There's a human dimension to these steps that doesn't need embellishment. A school expecting a parent who never arrives. Children whose weekend pivots without explanation. A household that, by evening, produces a medical emergency and a single location where it began and ended. True crime narratives often leap to motive. This one first honors sequencing. In cities like Denver, murders aren't just crimes. They tear at the fabric of a quiet community. But calling it too soon breaks trust. Building it from timestamps protects everyone, victims, families, and the record itself. What you should hold on to from this past is simple. The case has 2 verified time anchors and a narrow corridor between them where the fatal event occurred. Noon is fixed. The 911 call is fixed. The intervening hours can be interrogated without guessing because the devices, the school, and the responders provide an independent spine. The bathroom remains our only scene. No second address, no second story. If the later medical review supports a non-accidental cause, the clock you've just heard will carry the burden of opportunity. If the medical review supports an accident, the same clock will sustain it. We proceed without naming a perpetrator. The law requires evidence to meet elements, not narratives to meet expectations. In the next part, we will introduce a day of communication that increased pressure inside that already narrow window and placed a relational stressor into the timeline, documented, time-stamped, and relevant to intent only insofar as the facts allow. For now, the clock stands on its own. The timeline is fixed. A missed noon pickup and a later 911 call from a single Denver address. What enters the record now is a same-day confrontation, verified by messages and call logs that increased pressure inside that narrow window. A woman who met the husband on Tinder came forward. She allowed investigators to image her phone under consent. Technicians extracted message databases, normalized time zones, and preserved hash values. The content placed direct contact with Stacy Feldman, 44, on March 1, 2015, hours before the emergency call. Carrier returns corroborated who contacted whom and when. App records tied usage to the husband's account during the broader period. None of this declares how Stacy died. It does establish that an outside witness, unconnected to the home, raised an infidelity disclosure the very day Stacy was later found unresponsive in her upstairs bathroom. Detectives kept it procedural, document the disclosure, confirm the witness never went to the residence, lock chain of custody. The school's dismissal log anchors the front end, 911 and EMS stamps anchor the back end. The messages bridge the gap without creating a second scene. When you line it up, the sequence is clear: routine plan, disclosure, medical emergency. In intimate partner cases, that order is probative, not because it proves intent, but because it defines opportunity and context. The medical review must test. This evidence also narrows alternatives. Carrier records did not show a stream of third parties at the house, and the witness's role stayed digital. The case returns to what we already know: one home, one bathroom, one window in which the fatal event occurred. Prosecutors don't submit suspicions, they submit exhibits. Here, the exhibit is a time-stamped confrontation that belongs in front of any forensic specialist evaluating injuries and mechanics of a reported shower accident. We keep the file clean. Denver, March 1st, 2015, upstairs bathroom, Stacy Feldman. The communications explain why the investigation moved past undetermined toward expert review. Next, medicine answers whether the body's findings align with a fall or with airway compromise. For the first time in this file, medicine takes the lead. A strangulation asphyxiation specialist reviewed scene images, autopsy notes, and lab results without relying on anyone's narrative. The question was basic: do the injuries track a sudden slip in a shower, or do they align with airway compromise? The answer came from pattern, not from opinion. Neck structures told the story: subtle hemorrhage in soft tissues, distribution consistent with compression rather than impact. Petechiae were assessed in context, location, density, and correlation with neck findings. That pairing mattered. Petechiae alone are non-specific, but paired with soft tissue injury, they lean away from accident. Internally, there were no fracture patterns you'd expect from a hard strike to a fixed surface at head height. Externals didn't show the kind of patterned abrasions a fall against faucet hardware often leaves. Histology supported timing. The changes aligned with a perimortem event in the narrow window already fixed by the clock. The report separated resuscitation artifacts from cause. Rib fractures and bruising consistent with chest compressions were flagged as expected side effects of CPR, not evidence of assault. Water effects were accounted for. Lividity was read with caution. Prolonged wet exposure can shift appearance, so the expert used a hierarchy: airway structures first, corroborating marks second, then secondary features that water can alter. Toxicology did not hand the case an alternate mechanism. With impairment off the table, the spontaneous fall hypothesis had less support. All of this still happened inside one location: the upstairs bathroom in Denver on March 1st, 2015. No secondary scene existed to explain away the injury constellation. When the specialists mapped injuries against biomechanics, the scenario that best fit was not a slip, but mechanical interference with breathing. In practical terms, that reframed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide consistent. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem, and sometimes it was the proof. This pivot didn't close the case. It set the threshold. If a jury ever heard this file, they would hear the neck first, then the rest of the body, then the timeline that fenced it in. Procedure moved next from investigation to charging. We will follow that move without repeating the medical chapter, because in court, repetition isn't emphasis, it's weakness. Prosecutors don't file on hunches. They file when separate rails point the same way. In this case, 3 lines converged. The first was the clock you already know: noon missed, later 911, and the EMS ladder that boxed the event inside a narrow window at a single location: the upstairs bathroom of the Feldman home in Denver. The second was medicine. The expert reread that found injuries consistent with asphyxiation, not a spontaneous shower fall. The third was proximity and opportunity: who was present, who had access, and whose account had to fit between those fixed timestamps. When those rails aligned, the case moved from investigation to charge. The meeting where that decision is made is not dramatic. It's a review. Homicide detectives, a senior deputy district attorney, and the medical experts report on the table. Digital analysts summarize carrier returns and device activity relevant to the window between the missed pickup and the emergency call. The Tinder disclosure is presented only as context. Documented timestamp pressure on the very day Stacy Feldman, 44, was later found unresponsive. Each piece is weighed for admissibility. What comes in clean, what needs a limiting instruction, what must be left out. You don't win a case with everything you know. You win it with what the rules allow. Inconsistencies matter at this stage, but only the kind you can prove. If a statement places actions at a time the call logs or app records contradict, that conflict becomes an exhibit, not an accusation. If a version of events depends on an accident mechanism, the medical findings must tolerate it. Here, they didn't. The specialist's opinion gave prosecutors a causal theory that matched the time window and the absence of alternative actors. There was no evidence of a third party entering the home to create a second scene. The story had to live or die inside that bathroom and that clock. Colorado's first-degree murder statute requires intent and causation. Intent is rarely photographed. It's inferred from circumstances, motive pressure, the nature of injuries, and post-incident behavior. Causation is where medicine carried weight, with intoxication not offering an accidental explanation and the neck findings supporting mechanical interference with breathing. The file met the probable cause standard. The DA's office set the calendar in motion. February 2018, a first-degree murder count was filed against Robert Bob Feldman, the victim's spouse. From that point forward, the case was not a question of whether it would see a courtroom, but when. This isn't the end of the story. It's a threshold. Filing doesn't prove guilt. It signals that the state believes a jury should hear the evidence. The practical effect is immediate. Bond decisions, discovery exchanges, expert notices, and a litigation path that would stretch, in this case, over years. Families often fear that time blurs facts. Good files don't blur, they harden. The pairing of a tight digital window with a homicide-consistent medical read remained as firm in pretrial as it did on the day the charge was signed. We stayed disciplined. One house, one bathroom. March 1st, 2015, Denver, Colorado. A documented relationship stressor inside the window. A body that argues against accident. And by early 2018, a prosecutor willing to put that alignment in front of 12 citizens. Next, we'll cover how delays, rulings, and expert admissibility shaped what those jurors would actually be allowed to hear, without retrying the facts you already have. Filing a first-degree count in February 2018 did not put a jury in the box the next week. What followed was the slow part of American justice, the part the public rarely sees, but every homicide file must survive. Discovery moved first. Raw device extractions, carrier certifications, medical slides, scene images, interview audio, and chain of custody logs were duplicated, indexed, and exchanged. Defense counsel noticed experts of their own and asked the court to define guardrails for the state's strangulation specialist. None of this changed the facts you already know. It decided what jurors would be allowed to hear and how they would hear it. Admissibility hearings narrowed the issues. The court looked at the specialist's qualifications, the methods used to interpret neck soft tissue injury, the literature supporting those methods, and whether the opinion would help jurors distinguish accident from asphyxiation. The bar is reliability, not unanimity. When a judge rules an expert in, it means the method is recognized and the jury can weigh it. When the judge trims testimony, it keeps opinions inside demonstrated expertise, no speculation, no leap beyond the data. That's healthy procedure. It protects verdicts on appeal. Calendaring became a second battle. Complex homicide trials require weeks of court time and coordinated witnesses. This one stretched further as the COVID-19 pandemic forced postponements and reassignments. A case that began with a 2015 death and a 2018 filing was still waiting for a safe, open courtroom in 2020 and 2021. Families sometimes hear delay as doubt. It isn't. It's logistics, limited courtrooms, health protocols, and a docket backed up across an entire county. Strong cases don't stale with time, they calcify. The timestamp ladder and the medical read did not change because the calendar did. Between settings, the parties argued motions that matter later only for what they kept out. Prior bad acts evidence is not a shortcut, it's tightly policed. The Tinder communications remained in the case because they were day of, time-stamped, and probative of context within the narrow window we established. The court also set limits to prevent the state from converting motive pressure into character judgment. Jurors would hear about the confrontation because it happened on March 1st, 2015, not because it made anyone look good or bad. Expert logistics followed. The state disclosed exhibits that supported the asphyxiation consistent opinion, autopsy notes, histology slides, annotated images, so the defense could test methodology and prepare cross-examination. Both sides lined up their first responders, medical personnel, digital analysts, and the outside witness who contacted Stacy that day. Trial strategy is simple when the file is tight. The state builds by accumulation. The defense drills for reasonable doubt. Neither approach rewrites the scene. The upstairs bathroom at the Feldman home remained the only locus. Every ruling assumed it. Every witness list reflected it. The path to trial also set expectations for tone. The judge warned both sides that jurors would hear evidence, not argument disguised as testimony. For you as a viewer, that matters because clarity wins trials. A clean sequence of admissible facts is stronger than an angry monologue. In cities like Denver, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. But courtrooms protect communities by insisting on rules. Those rules were now locked. A jury would hear a narrow window framed by a missed pickup and a 911 call, a medical analysis that rejected a spontaneous fall, and a set of communications that explained why the investigation kept going. The case was ready to be tried. Courtrooms strip stories down to what can be proved. In Denver, the state opened by promising a narrow case, a fixed window established by earlier timestamps, a single upstairs bathroom as the only scene, and a medical opinion that rejected a spontaneous shower fall. The defense asked jurors to honor the original undetermined designation and to hold the state to its burden. Witnesses took the stand in an order that built, not echoed. First responders described what they found and what they did, staying within their notes and run sheets. The record's custodian introduced the 911 and EMS logs that bracketed the emergency. Medical personnel walked through documentation, then the state's strangulation asphyxiation specialist explained why the neck and airway findings aligned with mechanical interference with breathing rather than impact from a slip. The expert separated CPR artifacts from cause, addressed water-related changes that can confuse lividity and bruising, and tied timing to the narrow window already in evidence. Digital analysts followed. They authenticated call detail records and device extractions that showed routine activity up to a point and silence when activity should have continued. The state did not ask jurors to guess intent from technology. It asked them to accept that clocks do not have motives. A dating app witness unrelated to the household testified about contacting Stacy Feldman, 44, on March 1, 2015, disclosing an affair with the husband that day. The witness's device was imaged under consent. Timestamps matched carrier records. She did not visit the home. Her role was context and sequence, not physical cause. Cross-examination targeted the expert's limits. The defense pressed the idea that petechiae can occur in multiple scenarios and that bathrooms yield confusing patterns. They emphasized the case's initial undetermined posture and argued that absence of certain fractures could still fit an accidental fall. They questioned whether the state had overread ambiguous signs because of relationship drama. The expert stayed inside methodology, pointing back to the total constellation of neck soft tissue hemorrhage, distribution, and lack of injuries consistent with a hard strike on bathroom hardware. On the digital side, the defense highlighted what the data could not show, what happened unseen inside a room. That point was fair, and the state conceded its limits. Then it returned to what timestamps do show. Opportunity without outsiders. Jury instructions were straightforward. Colorado first-degree murder requires that the defendant knowingly cause the death after deliberation. The judge reminded jurors that lawyers' statements are not evidence, that expert testimony may be accepted or rejected in whole or in part, and that reasonable doubt is not imaginary doubt, but one based on reason and common sense. With that, the case went to deliberation. It did not take long. On April 19, 2022, the jury found Robert Bob Feldman guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Stacy Feldman, in Denver, Colorado. Under state law, the court imposed life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The proceeding ended with a single outcome and a single scene, a verdict that matched the evidence presented. One house, one window, and a medical reading that treated the body's signals as the deciding witness. There was an appeal. In 2024, the conviction was affirmed. The appellate court upheld admission of the strangulation asphyxiation expert and found no reversible error in the way the trial court handled the evidence. The sentence remained life without parole. There is no second ending to this story. Files like this are built to survive time. The earliest entries, school scheduling, missed pickup, emergency logs, were never dramatic. They were reliable. The later layers, device records, day of communications, and the expert reread were not flashy. They were disciplined. Together, they gave jurors a route from uncertainty to proof. In cities like Denver, justice relies on that kind of restraint, facts that speak for themselves and procedures that keep them clean. A brief word on the human cost. A family lost a mother. A community lost trust in an ordinary Sunday. When relationships fracture, accountability has to come from records, timestamps, bodies, and methods that don't care about excuses. The lesson is practical, not preachy. If something feels wrong, document it. If you're investigating, preserve first and conclude later. Truth endures best when it's written down. When I close a story like this, I can't help but think about what it means beyond the courtroom. Stacy's life ended in a place that should have been safe, her own home. What this case teaches us is that silence and accidents deserve a second look, and that truth is often uncovered through persistence and evidence. For those listening, maybe the takeaway is simple. Pay attention, speak up, and never underestimate the signs of danger close to home. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about the way this case unfolded? Do you believe forensic evidence always tells the full story, or are there limits we still need to face? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If this video spoke to you, if it moved you, or even if you didn't like it, I want to know why. And most of all, don't forget to hit subscribe so you'll be with me for the next story, because every case we cover has something to teach us.